Every field has their luminaries, their pioneers, and in cryptography, one of them is definitely Elizebeth Friedman. Her story is amazing. I'm going to give you the broad brush of it today. She worked on some crazy stuff, and I think it's a really good window into a field that is really obscure still for a lot of people, but has influenced like the events of the 20th century absolutely, right? So Elizebeth Friedman gets her start in, let's say, like 1915. Okay, she gets recruited to work at this place called Riverbank in outside this small town in Illinois. And the riverbank is run by this eccentric rich dude, George Fabian. And he's kind of got this dream of, he's created this quasi-scientific, informal institution where different scientists can come and pursue research projects of a whole wide variety. But one of the projects he supports is run by this woman, Elizabeth Gallup. And it's an investigation to demonstrate that the works of Shakespeare were actually written by Francis Bacon. Now, that is subsequently debunked by Elizabeth and her husband William themselves. But the point is that project is what brought Elizabeth into Riverbank. So her first job is looking at these old folio texts of Shakespeare and trying to look at like subtleties in the text to determine if there are any secret codes. William is also working down at Riverbank on genetic stuff with fruit flies, but he gets pulled into the Shakespeare project because he's good at statistical analysis. They meet, they fall in love, they get married, and they become this cryptography powerhouse. So one of the things that Elizabeth learns working on the Shakespeare thing is that the way they approached the Shakespeare thing wasn't very good. It wasn't repeatable, it wasn't consistent. And both Elizabeth and William Friedman, demonstrated many times throughout their careers that cryptography is a teachable skill. It is a formal subject. And so while at Riverbank, they wrote these series of papers, these seminal papers that kind of started the foundation of modern cryptography about how to do it, how to do the code breaking, things like statistical analysis, patterns, frequency, all that kind of stuff. These papers were so important. Now, George Fabian, our eccentric rich dude, he published them, but they weren't widely disseminated. They were kind of shared, with the military, but they made their way around the world and they set the foundation for a lot of cryptographic work, a lot of cryptographic agencies, including what the Germans did going into World War II. So they got quite far. So what happens at Riverbank? How does Elizabeth get off the Shakespeare thing and into the thing that, becomes the rest of her life? Well, World War I breaks out. Well, it doesn't break out, but it breaks out for the Americans. 1917, they enter the war. Now, as I've covered in a previous video, the Americans entered World War I because of a signals intelligence moment, the decryption and sharing of the contents of the Zimmerman telegram, which, encouraged the Mexico with the support of Germans to invade the United States. So this is a big deal, the Zimmerman telegram. And one of the things the United States military didn't have at the time was a cryptologic unit. They didn't have any code breaking abilities. So George Fabian, through his rich guy contacts, waves his hand and he's like, hey, I've got people who can do this. So the Army, the Navy, they go to Riverbank and it's the Friedmans, the original Shakespeare woman, Mrs. Gallup. She wants to stay working on her Shakespeare stuff. So the Friedmans, they jump in and they start decrypting all the intercepts that the American military is collecting during World War I, and they crack them all, and they just do an amazing job. And so they write these publications, they set the foundation of cryptography. So after the war, William stays working for the military, and he stays there for many decades, and he does brilliant work. And he becomes much more well-known in terms of cryptography and the foundation of it in the history. But this story is about Elizabeth. So after the war, she thinks, probably that's it, right? Like, what else is she going to do? But she's made a name for herself. It was recognized absolutely by the people that she worked with during World War I that she had her own amazing capabilities in terms of code breaking. So she gets recruited by the United States Treasury. Now, at the time, the Treasury was an umbrella organization for a bunch of individual departments, one of which was the Coast Guard. And the Coast Guard was picking up, because of its infrastructure, was picking up intercepts all over the place. secret coded messages. They needed somebody to decrypt these. Now, there's not a lot of people who can do code breaking in the United States in 1919, right? There's not that many. So they get Elizebeth Friedman in, and she starts, and with her pencil and her paper, and she was always a pencil and paper woman, she starts decrypting these transcripts. Now, what is the big issue for the United States Coast Guard in the interwar years? What are these secret messages uncovering? Activity of what? It's criminal organizations, because it's prohibition. And so it's all the criminal networks that are trying to smuggle alcohol in and around and into the United States. So she starts, and it's thousands of messages a year on her own, working for the Coast Guard. She is decrypting thousands of messages a year. Finally, she's like, hey, Coast Guard team, we need to expand the unit. A, I need help because the volume is just unbelievable. But B, I need to teach this to somebody so they can continue to teach it, and you can grow a unit here, because you're never going to not need cryptography now, right? So she gets her team and she trains them, and they're into the tens of thousands of messages every year. They contribute to over 600 criminal arrests. She testifies in 33 trials. This is all in the interwar years. And it's fascinating, right? The contribution that she made, because as she's doing this, both her and her husband were great at cataloging and capturing what they were doing. So she starts to build a system. And yes, she's so good at it. She develops, when you get really great at something, this high level of intuition about it. And she's amazing. But most importantly, she teaches it, right? And so she kind of develops this system of teaching people how to do cryptography and how to decode all this stuff. And her contributions are amazing. They don't end there. So World War II breaks out. The Coast Guard becomes part of the military. And so she is now not the head of the cryptography unit for, within the Treasury system. She's now moved to the military, and she's just, she has to report to this lieutenant, and she's not the lead anymore because, I don't know, she's a woman. Civilian woman at that, but she's the de facto leader, and she takes this job very seriously. She doesn't talk about this job during her lifetime. She is a person permanently bound to secrecy. She never talks about it. So all this comes out after she dies, when records become declassified. During the war, she has a really incredible role. She tackles, because of her experience and the Coast Guard's experience looking at criminal networks, they turn their attention to all these new intercepts that they're getting. Now, these aren't military intercepts from over in Europe. These are Coast Guard intercepts still from the line of the Americas, the coast of the Americas. Now, what is the Coast Guard getting? They're getting intercepts, German intercepts, that are detailing the activities of Germans in South America. So Germany had this big idea that they were going to, contribute to the rise of fascism in South America and use that as a launching pad to attack North America. So there was tons of German spy activity during World War II in South America, most particularly in Brazil and Argentina. And Elizebeth, she cracks all their codes. She does it all. Right up until the end of the war, she finds the spy ring, she finds the leaders, she decrypts everything. The FBI handles some stuff. It's not really well done. And then, because they expose the knowledge. This is always the tension in signals intelligence, right? You expose the knowledge that you have, and therefore the adversary knows that you can decrypt their stuff, and then they change it and make it harder. So they did that. I think it was in 1943. Elizebeth rises to the challenge. She decrypts the even harder stuff, and she maps the entire network. They get the leaders, they identify them, they bring down the whole thing. It embarrasses Argentina so much that they publicly sever all ties with Germany, breaking the Nazi dream of having fascism take over South America and use that as a launch pad to attack North America. I mean, she doesn't get all the credit, I realize that, but she gets a lot of the credit. Now, in her lifetime, she didn't get any of the credit. It was all classified. And J. Edgar Hoover, we all know he is. He gives the FBI all the credit for the work because they were the pointy end. They went in and, arrested people and captured the people and interrogated the people working with the Argentine police force. But It's Elizabeth work. It's her work. It's her decryptions that allow them to uncover the scope of the spy network. So she just has this amazing career. After the war, she catalogs a lot of what she's done. It's never as spectacular in terms of, she doesn't get to be a professor, but she informally teaches a lot of people. She writes about it. She and her husband as well, they catalog everything. The NSA takes a bunch of stuff back from the Friedmans because they like reclassify the stuff. And it's this constant tension of what to declassify, but they donate their entire of papers to an independent institution, which allows them to be accessed. If you want to read a book about her, I highly recommend this one, The Woman Who Smashed Codes. It's fantastic. Her story is amazing. I hope you like this story. Questions or comments, let me know. Otherwise, as always, I hope you are having a lovely day.